Hey folks, Shane here with ESEE Knives and Reynolds Veteran Training. I know during this quarantine time we're all trying to find projects that kind of keep our hands and minds occupied and still allow us to be productive. Last week I was rehafting this double bit axe and I spent way too much time on that handle. I happened to be documenting this process on our IG story, and I just made an offhand comment about a project I was thinking about doing, which was some PR4 liners, and the response was overwhelming. So I came in that evening, hopped on the interweb, and did a little quick Google search and found USAKnifemaker.com. They sell .030 liners. So I went ahead and ordered some. I hopped on the phone with Mike Perrin, co-owner of ESEE Knives. And Mike's our hardware guru. And so I told him what I was planning on doing, and he and I both kind of felt like I might need some different hardware to accommodate for the taller stack height of the scales once we add the liners. So we're going to try today to use some of our existing hardware from either the HM series or the SE5. Mike sent me a packet here, and we're going to do some experimenting and make these liners. I've never made these liners before, so if you've something you've done before and you know there's an easier or better way, please feel free to share those comments down below. Hopefully I learned something. I might be able to teach you something, and if nothing else, maybe you'll just learn from my mistakes. Even before I came on staff at ESEE, one of the things I always thought was cool about our culture is how much people want to modify them, change them, and make their own. That's always been a part of who I am and what I do, whether it be knives, guns, bicycles, whatever. I always kind of like making things have my own flavor. This is what this is all about. So just to catch you up, I started out using a center punch to kind of start the drilling process a little easier and a little more accurately. After doing that, I moved to a 3/16 drill bit for the lanyard hole. Then a 1/4 inch drill bit, started with the first hole and then placed hardware in as I went, so I was sure that everything lined up like it needed to. The next thing I'm going to do is I am going to cut these things out, and I'm going to leave a little bit of margin. Now the beauty of G10 is it's going to have to be polished a little bit, so I'm going to leave that margin of that cut, and then I'm going to use a Dremel tool with either a sanding wheel or a buffing wheel. I'm going to have to do a little experimenting there to see which one works out the best, so I get that nice shiny G10 when I'm done. So when you go to cut these out and you start to get into this tight spot right here, it's always a good idea to put some relief cuts in first. Without that, you run a really high risk of breaking a blade. Ask me how I know that. That's what I was afraid of. So you can see that we have margin all the way around right here. I had to do a little drill milling to get these things positioned exactly right so I could make the scales up, and I did put the factory hardware back in there. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to use my grinder and the buffing wheel to kind of knock this margin down and get it a little bit closer, and then once we get done with that, I'm going to take a Dremel tool and use a buffing wheel and see if we can't polish that G10 up like we like it, just so it has a nice contrast to that brown micarta. So after the buffing wheel on the grinder, I moved over here and I dug through my Dremel tools and I found the most worn out sanding drum I could find. I didn't want to use a new one that had really rough and coarse grit on it because I didn't want it to hog off material and potentially dig down into the micarta. So by using the one that was worn almost smooth, I was able to use the friction just to decrease the margins, and then I switched over to a buffing wheel and I actually applied compound to that wheel, and you can really see how that helped bring the shine out of that G10 and also to remove any marring up or anything that had been done to the micarta. I think with use and time, it's only going to get better. Now all that's left is final assembly. I'm going to try to use the original hardware, but I have a suspicion that it's going to be a little short. So I've got hardware from the JG5, the SE5, and the 6HM, and we're going to see if any of those work any better, and if not, we may have to do some customization and modification of this. So here's our final product. I went back to reassemble with the original PR4 hardware and it wouldn't work. It was just too short. I did some measurements. The JG5 hardware, which fits perfectly, the barrel nut on that is 19 millimeters tall. On the PR4, it's right at 10 millimeters tall, so it's significantly shorter. We added .030 per side to this scale, so you're going to need that extra height in order to securely lock it down. And while we're talking about securing down hardware, one thing we always suggest whenever you manipulate or change our sheaths or our handle hardware, we always ask that you use some blue Loctite on any hardware for sheath or for handles. All of our handle hardware, the overwhelming majority of our handle, requires 2 T15 Torx wrenches. So just keep that in mind. You can get Torx wrenches, you can get this hardware at our site, eseeknives.com. Just hit the store tab and you can see a whole list of support products there, from hardware to sheath parts and clips. Hope you've enjoyed the video. Please like and follow us on Facebook and Instagram, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Thanks, guys.